always envy musicians who can raise their hand and people get into it. And I try that when I'm doing sermons and people just sit there. Yeah. I want to go back and begin to tell you Jeff's story. By the time that Sandy was 24, she had been married for 3 years. Had tragically lost a child at birth, but was excited about the coming arrival of the newest member of the family. And on a Thursday, March the 1st, 1990, Jeffrey Randall Morris was born. Even with the arrival of two sisters, Becky in 1991 and Jessie in 1993, it was, as some of you know, difficult to be a happy family. There was violence in the household until 1994, when her husband left Sandy with the 3 children and very little else. The girls were 1 and 3, and Jeffrey was 4. But he was a sharp and sensitive 4-year-old. They moved in with Sandy's parents and formed an extended family. Chuck and Dagmar Benefill provided not only the love of grandparents, but with Chuck, a father figure for Jeff as well. A year or so after moving in with the Benefills, Jeff started school and loved it. It was about the same time that Sandy was beginning to reframe her faith, questioning some of the positions of the church that she had grown up in. And so part of Jeff's education was understanding the value of asking questions and not being willing to settle for unexamined conclusions. It turned out that Jeff and his mom were in school at around the same time, as Jeff was starting elementary school and his mom was headed back to college. And he kept wanting to read her college textbooks before he would do his own homework. On his own, in either kindergarten or first grade, he sat at the kitchen table and learned the multiplication tables in about 2 hours. The problems that he had in school didn't stem so much from the fact that he couldn't do the work. It was that he could do so much more than the work. The pattern for his learning wasn't so much a group setting in a controlled environment. He did far better with his own questioning and study. Even nature, with his love of animals, became part of his classroom. 2001 was a pivotal year, not only for our nation with the attacks of 9/11, but for Jeff as well as he entered middle school. That was the same time that he stepped out of sports. It seems as though as everything got more and more organized and regimented, his resistance increased, and the transition of the middle schools where he felt attacked was difficult as well. After 10 years with the Benefills, the Morrises moved to their present home in February of 2005. Jeff was almost 15 and in high school. It was 87 days after he turned 16 that his grandfather, Chuck, passed away. It was in that same time frame that his desire to experience everything life had to offer took what turned out in time to ultimately be a dangerous turn. He began to first experiment with and then embrace and finally be abused by some drugs, but mainly, it seems, alcohol. 2 years after his grandfather passed away, his grandmother died. He was 17 at the time. That turmoil got mixed in with the belief that he needed to break with conformity and no longer come under traditional authority. So as soon as he was legally able to do so, which was the age of 18, he put school on the back shelf and stepped away. The amazing thing in all of that is that through all of this, he remained a good soul, his family said, very sweet and respectful to them. He teased his sisters. He would announce his arrival with a funny squeak or a tweet. I tried to see if I could do it. We all sound like miniature elephants when we do it. He perfected, they told me, the one-eye stare. His interest in music and creative writing and reading and game playing and being part of a group of guys and family continued to grow. Somewhere he had read or heard about a book called A Separate Peace, a story of teenage boys in the early 40s who would hang out together and became good friends even though each one was significantly different from the other. In the book, they were bound together in a summer pact, and they celebrated their individual uniquenesses. Jeff saw each one of his friends as a separate piece, not just a P-I-E-C-E, a piece that made up the whole, the entirety of his life, but a P-E-A-C-E, a relationship with those around him. If you were different in Jeff's world, that wasn't just okay. From his perspective, it was more than that. Differences were to be embraced and even celebrated. As he entered his 20s, he was getting ready for the next steps in his life. He knew from family he had support. He knew from family and friends that he was loved. In many ways, life was good, but not in all ways. Whether his drinking was an addiction or not, from a technical standpoint, I do not know. Maybe it was just an element in the party scene, but I do know that it wasn't a neutral observer. For whatever it promised wasn't enough to make up for the devastation that it caused. When the depression, and many of you were aware of that, would settle in, the alcohol at times allowed it to take over, and things that Jeff would never do in his right mind when he had control would happen under the influence of the alcohol especially. And he would really get down on himself. He had very powerful, meaningful friendships, but even those found it difficult to reach him in those moments. The night his life came to a close, I believe there was a force or a power other than his own conscious, conscientious self that took over and took Jeff from us. And in that moment, Jeff stood before the Creator who made this world that he so appreciated. And I don't know what was said, but I do know that in that moment he stood before one who understands his heart and his struggles and his searching for faith more clearly than any of us here. And I'm grateful for a God who loves us and who does what is right. He is survived by his mom, Sandy, his sisters, Becky and Jesse, his aunts, Ellen Benefield and Diana Dawson, their families, including his cousins Allison, Katie, Taylor, and Ethan. Several of the family wanted to just share a few thoughts. And so Allison is going to share, and then Jesse, and then representing the many friends that are here, Anthony is going to share just a few things as well. Now, if we had everybody share, and in a way we want that to happen, but we don't have the time to do that. But at the back, cards, half sheets of paper, have been provided, and pens. And what we really want to ask all of you to do is to write down the memories that you have, maybe the best memory that you have of Jeffrey. And we want you to then just fold it up and hand it to a member of the family, and they will be able to read those, not just today, but a week from today, a month from today, 6 months from today. Because grief does not just happen once and then it's gone. But it is a process that this family and his friends will have to go through. Allison, I'm going to ask you to come. I'm going to bring the microphone down to you. And then Jesse. And then after Jesse, we'll have Anthony come.
Try to get through this. We spent our childhood together, side by side, trying to get the high score on Super Nintendo, making up games under the willow tree, exploring every inch of the house on Ivy Street, and of course standing in front of an open refrigerator. We were kids, we didn't know anything, and we didn't care. If I had a choice, I would never leave from under that willow tree. But time forces us to grow. No one is time but God's beating heart. In this life, we are given so much. In this life, we are given so much. In the life we are given, so much can happen that we can never plan for, change, fix, or help. When it comes down to it, you are in charge of every decision you make, for better or worse. It seems like Jeff has more friends than I can have space left in my head to remember all their names. And I know for a fact has family that loves him unconditionally. And this is where the pain comes from. Love wasn't accepted fully and looked knocked over as if it wasn't real, filled with a liquid solution that only distorted his views. But beyond that, Jeff has got to be one of the most accepting people who's walked in this earth. Talented in so many ways, creative, wise, and what he wanted to be. A free spirit who cared about making things right in the world that he saw wrong, sticking up for what was truest to him. Man, did he have fun doing it. Today is about honoring this life, this boy, this friend, this cousin, this nephew. That's him. This boy, this friend, this cousin, this nephew, this brother, and this son. With honoring Jeffrey comes accepting, forgiving, and remembering. Thanking God for the good times we were able to create, remembering and embracing the life that lived, and will always live in our hearts.
Okay, I'm going to try to speak really clear. Jeff Morris, always Guppy to me, meant so much to so many people. He touched the hearts of hundreds and changed the lives of everyone he came into contact with. To me, Guppy was my everything. My brother, my big secret keeper, my mentor, my best friend, and my hero. I was always right behind him. I think the whole reason I started walking was so I could keep up with him. For more than half my life, I did everything he did. I was a mini Jeff, and it didn't bother him at all. He liked having me as his sidekick, and I wouldn't change those years for the world. As we grew up, we individualized, and for the first time, you can see where Jeff ended and I began. But we were still in step together, and he was still my hero. That will never change. People keep asking me why my brother did what he did. At first, I thought it was a stupid question that didn't really have an answer. Well, I found that answer. Jeff was searching for a peace he so well deserved. That peace cannot be found in this world, and so he went in search of it for somewhere elsewhere. I can feel it deep down that he found it, and now he can finally rest. To everyone who feels alone and somewhat abandoned, you are not by yourself. Jeff wouldn't have left you. I know he's still with me. I can feel him in my heart. Jeff's death has hurt so many. Those who hurt should remember something very important. What matters now is that Jeff doesn't hurt anymore. He's found that peace and can now stop struggling to find it. He wouldn't want any of us to be in pain. He would want us all to move forward in our lives with him in our hearts. No one can forget my brother, but remember him with a smile because he would never have wanted to hurt us. A wise man once texted me, telling me not to feel guilty for moving on. He said, and when I say move on, I only mean stand back up. Get up from the spot where our knees collapse and keep moving. Not as if it didn't happen, but with courage and faith that he's in a better place. As I sat there and pondered his words, wondering if I ever really could move on and if Jeff would have wanted me to keep moving, I looked up at the dark sky and saw a shooting star streaking across it. I thought that only happened in movies. But Jeff, my big brother, my best friend, my mentor, my hero, and my shooting star, told me that it was okay to move on. I don't have to hurt forever. I will miss Jeff every second of every day. But I can get through this knowing that he loved me and remembering that he isn't truly gone as long as he lives in all of us. Long live Jeff Morris.
Anthony. And as Anthony comes, let me remind you, we really want to ask all of you to take one of those sheets of paper and let us have a permanent record of what you remember, what you celebrated about his life.
Jeff? Jeff was my best friend. We've seen and done so much together. We hung out every single day. I never knew anyone like Jeff. He was the nicest person I've ever met in my life. He was sophisticated, and he was observative and analytical in a very good way. Always willing to give good advice only when asked, though. He was very solemn, and he was a loyal friend, the loyalest friend that I could ever imagine. He had beliefs that he stuck to, and for that I have a great deal of respect for him. He has taught me and so many others who had the privilege of knowing him so much, and we are grateful for his impact on our lives. I speak for me and all the homies. When I say Jeffrey Randall Morris, our most gracious leader, has willed the time of his own departure, we will miss his majesty for generations to come, and we shall confide amongst each other to keep his spirit within our hearts. And now Jeff the King finally rests in peace.